Just a few days back, I happened to watch the recorded telecast of the discussion or the press briefing between Donald Trump and Emmanuel Macron of France. I saw the unedited, unadulterated footage on the Forbes Breaking News YouTube channel. It was a 30-minute discussion, and uh, it evoked in me some memories of a couple of things which I wrote when the Ukraine war started in 2022. Now, there's a lot to say about how the media has misreported that briefing. It was a sensible discussion. There's nothing like Macron correcting Trump or anything like that. It was a frank, fair discussion between two people who are really good at diplomacy. Both Trump and Macron, they were at their diplomatic best behavior and best performance. Now, the recent events bring back to me what I've been thinking for a long time. I started analyzing strategic politics and international politics in the late 90s. And that's when people like Noam Chomsky, they had come up with the buzzword of neocon or neoconservative. After the end of Cold War, it was a US hegemony all over the world. It's US absolutism. The neoconservatives thought that, yeah, that is the situation of the world to be. It's going to be a unipolar world. And for them, the expression of that unipolar world was the abject humiliation of their defeated enemy with the Russians. The Russians were soundly defeated in the First Chechen War, and that only boosted their egos. They used the Balkan Wars to further humiliate the Russians in their sphere of influence. And it went on. When Vladimir Putin first became the president of the Russian Federation in 2001, he had in fact requested that the NATO expansion eastwards be stopped. Again, that expansion was a contravention of an agreement between US, NATO, and Russia in the early 90s, but they continued expansion. Putin even requested that Russia be allied with NATO. Can you imagine? And NATO, a formation that was created to counter the Warsaw Pact, Russia wanted to join it. They said, rather than be adversarial, why can't we be friends? That was rejected because how can we not humiliate Russia? They are our former enemies. The US absolutist hubris, in terms of conventional warfare, that is a war against a nation state, any organized military. US and NATO, they were the absolute masters of it, with overwhelming superiority all the way till the early 2000s. But something happened in Mogadishu in 1994. The Somali pirates absolutely routed the US military, including the Delta Force. That was seen as an aberration. They did not pay much attention to it. Then September 11, 2001 happened. The first attack on continental United States in 2 centuries. I believe nobody has attacked continental US since British burned down the White House. That must have been in the early 1800s or so. After that, nobody has dared to be able, nobody had the ability to attack them. Germany could not, Japan could not, Soviet Union could not. And yeah, you have a couple of ragtag terrorists from some caves in Afghanistan who were able to do that. US was furious. They launched an invasion of Afghanistan, which they completed successfully. They sent the Taliban packing, not finished, but packing. And then they moved on to the next target, Iraq, just out of hubris. They just wanted to show that, yeah, they are a bully. They can do whatever they want. To hell with the United Nations, to hell with the rules-based order. Yeah, the catchword. To hell with all those things. But yeah, we can do whatever we want. To hell with anything. It would have made much more logical sense for US and NATO to attack Iran. Iran has been an enemy of United States since 1979, since the revolution. Iran has consistently been attacking US and its interests for the last couple of decades. There was even the Beirut bombings in which several dozens of Marines had died. They were sponsoring terrorism all over the world. In terms of casus belli, that is the reason for war, Iran had given a lot. But no, the Iran were too powerful. So they chose, okay, let's attack and destroy an Iraq. That was thoroughly weakened, demolished, right? Then they were sucked into the war on terror. They realized that their conventional military superiority does not stand a chance. That's not what is required to fight a guerrilla warfare, to fight a non-conventional war. So as that conventional warfare fighting abilities eroded and they tried to match up in terms of non-conventional warfare, they forgot that there was another enemy that is rising in the east, the People's Republic of China. In 2010s and 2011, that's when China really increased the heat on South China Sea, capturing Spratlys, Paracel Islands, and generally getting into confrontations over Vietnam, Philippines, uh, and all these other countries. Basically, the UN Convention of Law of Sea was ignored. It was in the mid of 2010s that US suddenly realized that China no longer feared us. US had lost its conventional superiority in the Pacific theater. That was the real wake-up call for the neocons because their worldview had shattered. It was no longer a unipolar world. But they were screwed. They could not do anything. Their conventional forces that can be used against a state actor was eroded, gone, demolished, and they were stuck in two wars. So their first priority, get out of the war. Obama did not help. He was also part of the neocon conspiracy. From George Bush Sr. to Clinton to George W. Bush to Obama and by continuation Biden, they are all part of the neocon conspiracy, the neocon attitude of American supremacy, where Russia is the enemy. Is Russia really the enemy of Europe? No. Until the Russian Revolution in 1914, the Empire of Russia was just as much any European power as all the other colonial European power. You had the bonds of intermarriage, you had the bond of alliances, you had all those things. It was just the communism, the specter of communism that made Russia hated by the West. Now that specter is gone. Under Putin, you have a government that is just like any other European country. So it's more absolutist, it's Russian. It's it's Europe in the Russian way, but I believe Russia is something that is can be considered closer to Europe than any other country. They have similar cultures. So that is a correction that I'm seeing right now. Since the Trump won, Trump was not constrained by the neocon school of thought. He came as an outsider. He realized that the true threat to US is China and not Russia. Russia is a valuable ally. There's a historical factor that most people don't seem to remember. Two people tried to invade Russia, Napoleon and Hitler. Both of them failed spectacularly. There has been only a couple of successful invasions on Russia and Europe, and that was done by Huns and Mongols. Huns and Mongols devastated Russia, devastated Western Europe, and that generational trauma lasts till this day. It's a 1,000-year trauma. And even today, if Russia has a genuine threat, it doesn't come from Europe, it comes from China. In 1969, the Ussuri River conflict, that's when Soviet Union first realized the threat of from PRC. That was it's actually a funny conflict. I'll talk more about it that later. But that's when the Sino-Soviet split happened. Those conditions still exist. A powerful China is not is even more of a threat to Russia than to US. So what I'm seeing right now, especially in the way the narrative is being built out, Ukraine is going to get sacrificed. You have a US-Russia alliance with NATO and the European Union as partners. European Union and US, they will get their economic benefits out of Russia or out of Ukraine. They will play as token peacemakers, and basically they'll reestablish their economic relationship that was there in 2022. The last 3 years of sanction, it's like it never happened. It will be like that in a few months. And then the orientation would be towards China. Right now, US Donald Trump is being very smart about any communication regarding Taiwan, even despite the grave provocations from Chinese armed forces recently. They're playing a smart game. Let's finish this war first, then let's focus on to China because US needs Russian alliance to take on China. And I think it's going to happen. It's definitely interesting times. Now, of course, Ukraine is going to get screwed. See, there is no sense of right and wrong. Its might is right always. The list of nations and peoples that have been trampled under the foot under the great power games are many. Nations and peoples have been trampled, they've been humiliated, they've been erased and destroyed. It happens, it keeps on happening. That's what happens in all the great power games. Nobody has anybody's interest in mind. Everybody plays to their own self-interest. US is playing to its interest. Russia is playing to its interest. NATO and EU, they're also playing to their interest. It was in their interest, supposedly in their interest in the last 3 years to fund the war in Ukraine. It was their interest that Ukrainians fought and died against Russians. The neocons wanted a Russia-Ukraine war so that Russia can be weakened. But did Russia weaken? No. Russia, in fact, became stronger. It proved that it's resilient. Russia always wins in an attrition war. They forgot that. So I think it's going to be quite interesting things that we get to see in the next couple of weeks, if not months. Take care.